off. So welcome everybody, really thank you for joining us. Lovely to see/hear you all. This event today is part of an initiative called 32 Steps to Togetherness, which is all about building connections within and between communities. I thought I'd start us off by telling you a bit about 32 Steps to Togetherness and why we as civil society consulting are interested in creative health. And then I'll hand over to Lillian Greenwood, the Shadow Minister for Civil Society. And then we're going to hear from all of our speakers. And I've got a question for each of the speakers. So Cedric, Owen, Nathaniel, could you give us a wave? And I think Brendan is joining us, but not currently with us. So we'll hear from all of our speakers. And if while you're listening, you've got a question for the speaker, please pop it in the chat. I'd much rather ask them one of your questions and bring the room in. And then Lillian has a few questions for the speakers and indeed all of us in the room. So we'll get a bit of conversation going at that point. And then it'll be our turn as the panelists, but also as the whole room to ask Lillian a few questions. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to pop the agenda in the chat as well so everybody can see. So what is 32 Steps to Togetherness? I hear you cry. So Civil Society Consulting, which is the organisation hosting this event, is a non-profit working towards health, equality and cohesion through providing affordable support to the sector in general and free support to grassroots organisations in particular. And we became very passionate about tackling loneliness and isolation when we were commissioned to develop a learning programme by the Campaign to End Loneliness back in 2020, 2021. And while we were becoming sort of loneliness experts, we noticed the links between loneliness and social fragmentation. So when we're feeling lonely, we tend to become distrusting and shy and withdrawn and even irritable. And in that way, the symptoms of loneliness can mean that when you're feeling lonely, you're more prone to divisive narratives and intolerance. And basically, from that kind of starting out point, widespread loneliness can pave the way for a divided society. So we found ourselves passionate about these two issues, you know, health and loneliness and social cohesion more generally. And the solution to both of them is the same, which is connection. And so we developed a manual of 32 practical actions that we can take as individuals or as community leaders to build connections within communities or between communities. So 32 is a lot, but you don't have to do them all. And I think basically as we were developing this resource, we realized that connection and community actually feels like it's at the root of almost all of the problems that we're working on with different organizations. So I kind of joke with my colleagues that I challenge you to give me any problem, whether it's youth violence or community resilience or the early onset of frailty, that you can't kind of trace back to loneliness and disconnection as a root cause. You always find the breakdown of communities somewhere involved in the root cause. And having this realization, I think, really lit the fire in our bellies even more as civil society consulting. So what we're doing through 32 Steps, we're using the manual of the 32 Steps to Togetherness manual as a kind of shared vision for building a community of community leaders. So we want to forge a network of grassroots organisations that are bringing people together in their respective communities across the UK. We want to support them directly in their work and bring them together so that they can form this kind of meta community, so to speak. So and whilst also bringing together a wider community of sort of togetherness champions. So for those of you who aren't grassroots organisations, still part of our community, I hope. And we're running events like this one to inspire and connect people. We're providing the free support to grassroots organisations. So like the film that you saw about Sabat Gallery, who's speaking today, and impact reports and this kind of thing. And we're also building an online community. So a little shout out to follow our new Instagram account where we're going to be sharing stories of togetherness from across the UK as sort of inspiration. So where does today's topic, creative health, come into all of this? why are we interested in creative health at Civil Society Consulting? Well, creativity connects us, and I think that's surely one of the big reasons that it's so good for our health. And we've had some wonderful events bringing together community leaders already, and we find that so many organisations are using creativity in their work. So that's one of the big reasons. And then in parallel to all of this, we do, through the affordable support that we deliver, we do a lot of work looking at how the voluntary and community sector can be better integrated into the healthcare system, so that the healthcare system can better address the social determinants of health and therefore reduce health inequality. So stopping health issues arising rather than treating them after they have arisen. And we've been recently tasked by the GLA to explore how it might be possible to help grassroots organisations delivering creative health initiatives communicate and articulate their impact to the health system, so that funding can better flow from the statutory sector into the voluntary and community sector. And I guess, long story short, the role of creative health in tackling inequalities is really, really clear. And some of the people on the call are people I've spoken to all about this, but it's just really, really difficult to verbalise, let alone quantify sometimes what the impact and the outcomes are of creative health in the kind of biomedical terminology and frameworks that the health system uses. So that's kind of another angle on today's event. A bit of housekeeping. If everybody could stay muted, we don't stress it too much, we'll mute you if not, but that would be great. And if you can keep videos on as much as possible, as much as you're comfortable with. Today's actually gotten quite large, and we normally try to keep the events not too busy, so that we can get a nice conversational atmosphere going. And it's lovely to see your faces to help with that. So, and also just a flag for anyone who's recently joined that we are recording the meeting as well. So that's another element. So I'm going to pass over to Lillian Greenwood, Shadow Minister for Civil Society, to introduce herself and sort of today's event.
That worked. You know how we were all in lockdown and we could all know how to use Zoom, and I think I've lost that. I'm so rare that I do it. I've lost the habit completely. Well, first of all, it's really not. Oh, I'm spotlighted now, so I can't see you all. But it was really nice to see you all a second ago. Oh, there you are. You've all reappeared again. So. As Natasha said, I'm Lillian Greenwood. I'm the Member of Parliament for Nottingham South, and I've been in that role since 2010. But I'm also the Labour's Shadow Minister for Arts, Heritage and Civil Society, which I've been doing since September last year. And my brief also has includes loneliness and youth services. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to join your coffee club discussion this morning. I'm really here to listen as much as to say anything, although I'm really glad to have this opportunity. So just to say a little bit about civil society first. In January, Keir Starmer announced that Labour is working on a new civil society mission plan, looking at how we best work in partnership with civil society. So the vast array of voluntary and community sector organisations, charities, social action organisations to launch, to create a society of service, and to ensure that civil society organisations, faith groups and all of the other groups are part of our attempts to, if we're fortunate enough to be in government, to implement our 5 missions, which I've kind of taken those as read, but they're around growing the economy, getting the NHS back on its feet, delivering safer streets, creating the UK as a green energy superpower, and breaking down the barriers to opportunities. And over the coming weeks and months, we'll be holding further conversations and roundtables and working groups as we develop a civil society mission action plan. So harnessing the energy and expertise of civil society, because we think that civil society will be an absolutely essential partner in delivering on our 5 missions if we're in government. And you just have a really vital role to play in that kind of attempt to have a decade of national renewal, as Keir has set out. Last month, we all also launched our plan for the arts, culture and creative industries at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. We know that arts and culture are absolutely central to our national story, and our cultural lives are a source of national pride. And listening to what Natasha was saying, I was struck by one of the things that Keir said in his speech at that launch. He said that arts and culture are about bringing us together, finding what we have in common, searching for truth and meaning. And I think that really speaks to today's events. We know that arts and culture are part of that sense of need to be part of that national renewal. They're a key driver of economic growth, but they also have a role to play, again, in the achievement of each of the 5 missions, including creating a healthy, more connected, less unequal society. So we've set out an entire plan around how we're going to support arts and culture. I don't think there's time for me to go through all of that right now, but I'd be very happy. If I haven't already, then I'll share it with Natasha and she can share it with all of you. But it ranges from, making sure that the creative industries have what they need to grow, and whether that's making sure that every child has access to high quality creative education, making sure that everyone has the skills they need for the sort of good jobs that are available in the creative industries, finding ways to get more investment into the ecosystem of the creative industries, and dismantling the economic and social barriers to participation in arts, culture, creative industries, so that everyone can enjoy them, whether that's as an artist, an author, a performer, a reader, or an audience member. And we know that these are really important for people's health and well-being, as well as opportunities for growth and jobs. There's lots more I could say about our view around the space to create, and creating a national cultural infrastructure map to support local authorities and investors to spot opportunities, getting more resources into towns and cities, particularly those that are struggling. And we know that arts and culture can be a really important part of regeneration and helping places to thrive, safeguarding arts and art spaces and building up cultural infrastructure. That's at the heart of our mission for economic growth across the country. And we've committed to an urgent review of curriculum and assessment to ensure that we have a rich, broad, inclusive and innovative curriculum that includes arts and drama and music. Also supporting the museums and galleries sector so that it can make more of their art available to everyone and to all communities, and supporting all the organisations that are involved in arts and culture, including conducting a review of Arts Council England. I'm going to stop there because I realise I could keep on talking, and I can't see any of you, so I can't even work out if you're bored or not. But I'm really happy to be here and to listen to what you've got to say, and obviously to use the opportunity to ask some of you some questions about your experiences and what you think that an incoming Labour government could do to support you in your work and practice that's helping to achieve all those things that I anticipate we're talking about creating a more inclusive, more equal society where everyone has the opportunities to thrive. Thanks, Natasha.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lillian. Yeah, and Helen, I'm just going to unmute you because you've just said this is music to our ears. I thought you might want to say it out loud.
This is music to our ears, Lillian. We've been in an awful time, and we're facing so much closure and what have you, exactly at the moments that we need it. So obviously, yeah, this is music to my ears, certainly. But then I just wanted to pull in about the messaging around that, and particularly on about safer streets. As I've put there, a message has gone out from a local prospective Labour MP, and it's talking about youth crime or or you know, these sorts of things, just in a really demonizing way about the kids who are doing that stuff. And it may change my vote like that. That's not what I want to hear. So I just wondered if you've got any thoughts about how we can make sure, or you can make sure, that the messaging that comes out from that brings people together, not dividing them, please. Thank you. You can mute me again now.
I am going to mute you, Helen, but I think that's a really wonderful point, and I'm sure everybody on the call shares the sentiment. So that's why I'm confident skipping over it, but skipping to our speakers, because yes, ever conscious of time. But thanks, Helen. Yes, there we go. So we're going to come to Nathaniel. Nathaniel, where are you? So Nathaniel works with Azad, and if anyone watched the video that I shared in advance of the event, I hope you did. This is the gallery that featured in the video. So that's spread, and we're going to come down to London and hear about Cedric Wilby's work. Cedric and I met through the GLA piece of work that I mentioned in my opening. And then we're going to come to the east of England to Brendan, who is the CEO of Dance East. And then we're going to come slightly closer to London again, but still in the east, with Owen from the Theatre Royal in Bury St Edmunds. So Nathaniel, I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to spotlight you and invite you to speak.
Yeah, so do you want me to start? Are you going to ask questions, or are you going to just talk? How do you want to do it? I don't mind.
Well, I know that we spoke before that you'd sort of talk a bit about the story about how Sabat Gallery started.
Yeah.
What you do now, who you support, and yeah, I would love to hear about your views on the role of creativity and bringing people together.
Yeah, of course. So just quick introduction. Hi, my name is Nathaniel. I'm the coordinator for Sabat Gallery. I'm stepping in for Azad Mohammed, who's the director. He couldn't make it at the minute. He's currently in Iraq working as a lecturer in art, so I'm stepping in his place. So just a bit about how Sabat Gallery started. It started in 2013 by Azad Mohammed. He moved to England in the early 2000s from Iraq. He had the choice of living down in London, making a lovely art career, or choosing the lovely northeast, where everyone knows it's lovely and warm and sunny. So of course he picked the move up here, and he had a shop across the road in South Bank, which is a very, very deprived area in the northeast, and I'd say England as well. Everything's closed, all industry went, so South Bank's not good at all. Had a shop across the road, saw the building, which was an old Methodist church, and then it was a council building. It was empty for about 5-6 years, on a demolition list. It was there on demolition for a couple of years, as I had planned to get the building before it was even untouched, perfectly fine. Council said, no, you can't have it, we're going to knock it down, pulled the roof down, pulled the back wall down. Then as he was going to go back and lecture again, they said, oh, you can have it now, after it was basically destroyed. And over the past 10 years, he's slowly been trying to build it back up. And just by himself, he's put all his money into it, all his career, everything he does over in Iraq just goes straight into the gallery, and he funds it, and it's continued strongly for the past 10 years. So a bit about what we do. I'd say over the past 10 years, the gallery's went from strength to strength. Originally when we started, Azad's big plan for the gallery was very much a community gallery. We focused on doing some local exhibitions, national exhibitions, and international exhibitions, highlighting local artists from the area who never get a chance to in the big art galleries that won't ever touch them. So we try and highlight your average artist down the road, your next door neighbour, or your international or national artists, some from Iraq, some from elsewhere around the world. So we try and highlight everyone. As well as that, we're very much for the community. We have started our community garden project when I started here in 2021, which was helped through civil society consulting. That was one of our really first big grants, as I managed to get for the gallery, 3 years lottery funding, and it's pushed our community garden from strength to strength. It's an amazing space. We have regular volunteers now. We've got a litter picking community now. One of our members is the head of litter picking in South Bank. So that, again, is a lovely area for our warm space this year. And last year, we had a lot of people interested in that, and as well as the gallery. As well as that, we do free Saturday art classes every single week for the community and children. Again, all for the local community, all completely free, as well as every activity in the gallery is completely free. We work with local families, allowing them to do arts and crafts. They have some food, drinks, because as we know, this area is very deprived. There's a lot of food banks in the area, a lot of homelessness. So we try and give the children and families a little reprieve for a couple of hours so they don't have to struggle and don't have to worry about money. As well, go on, sorry.
Daniel, I was going to offer to show some of the images that you shared to bring some of this
Yeah,
to
of course.
life.
Yeah.
And then maybe you could tell us a bit about your views on how the role that creativity plays in bringing the community together.
I'd say for the gallery as a whole, creativity brings the community together really, really well, especially for us at the gallery. Through the World Community worked on the Bridge project, which is being shown there, that brought 23 artists together on a bridge project over 2 days. They're all outside. Everyone completely loved it. Again, that was just for all local artists. Most of them had never done anything on that scale before, so that brought them together. As well as that, our family art trolley brings children and families together who might not during the week have chance to come together, do anything as a family. So we create a space that's warm and welcoming for them to come, relax and engage as a family. We also have our community garden, which has brought a lot of ex-addicts and recovering alcoholics and drug addicts, as well as ex-military, into volunteering. And that's brought in their mental health and their physical health really, really well. We have a bloke called Dale who's been coming in for the past 2 years. He's ex-military, he's been homeless, and he's found a really, really nice place here at the gallery where he can come and relax. And we're always welcoming to him. There's never any prejudice here, but we're open to everyone. As you can see there, community litter pick, our community warm space, which we started 2 years ago now, has been going really, really well. And we've received a Mayor Community Achievement Award last year, which was for our community warm space as well, because it was one of the only ones in the area which supported a lot of people.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Nathaniel. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I hope people did take a moment to watch the video, and if not, maybe that's inspired you to, because it's a really beautiful video, and Nathaniel's the star. So let's come now to Cedric. I've lost you. Where are you? Here you are. Awesome. Ready to be spotlighted? Great. We're also going to need you to come off mute. Fab.
Can you hear me? I'm
yes.
on mute, yeah?
Yes, we can
Right,
hear you.
firstly,
Yeah.
thank you for sort of inviting me to this event. I put networker because I do belong to a number of different networks. And I've sort of, I suppose I've been invited specifically for one network, that is the SHREP, which is the Southwark Health and Cultural Health and Wellbeing Partnership, based in here in London. And importantly, I was glad to hear sort of Lillian's kind of opening commentary regarding the mission. It would be really interesting to read what that actually means, because I didn't hear anything about funding. I didn't hear anything about finance. And I didn't hear about sort of being clear about who we want to fund and will get funding, because usually it's the same old groups, same old organizations that are getting the large pots. And you had Nathaniel talking about something that I feel most of the grassroots groups that I work with, in terms of small, medium size, who always having to prove themselves with regards to being a community asset in a community, recognizing that what they do, always having to sort of prove that, guess what, we've brought in the numbers, we've brought in the people, we've got them engaged, we're getting their self-esteem through the arts, but also just mobilizing communities. And that's what I suppose that's what SHREP is about, is mobilizing community. And I think it's important to recognize that how we came together was partly to do with the All Party Parliamentary Group report on the arts and health and wellbeing in 2015. And the report sort of kind of almost paved the way for kind of almost a national movement on arts and health. And I think, and one of the key recommendation has been about the formation of networks, creates space for partnership across culture, health, and other sectors. And I think it's important that when Nathaniel spoke about And that was a really beautiful film, because the film demonstrated the diversity of its people coming through that door. And if that was a surgery or a hospital or a school or some mandatory or statutory agency that's linked to social care, and they weren't bringing in those individuals into those spaces because of whether it's the culture, whether it's the stigmatization of going into some spaces, especially some warm spaces for some of our groups, they probably would have shut that space down or continue funding it. But a space like Nathaniel's, Sabat, they're doing something that is bringing in people and having to sort of struggle to get funding every time for a project. We don't need to prove ourselves on projects. We know we deliver. And that's what I wanted to hear from you, Lillian, and perhaps you will talk about that. And, but yeah, I'll go back to who I am. As I said, my background is in education.
I was going to say that so well put, Cedric, and I don't know if you can see, but I can. Lots of people nodding, including Lillian. So really well put. But I think it would be really great, if you could tell everybody a bit about SHWEP and how it can be. They might have had a little look on the bio, but they also maybe didn't. So it'd be nice to explain kind of, that context.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is about everybody in this room, and probably the 85–90% of the population appreciates the value of art and culture. And also, I think a lot of people also recognize that it can tackle both health and well-being, as well as tackling health inequalities. And that's why SHWEP came about. I mean, the SHWEP, as I said, was linked to the All Party Parliamentary Group's report on arts and well-being. And what we felt, or what was felt by the original members, because I joined SHWEP quite later, but what we wanted to do, I joined it in 2022. It was the whole objective of SHWEP was to be a have a borough-wide in Southwark strategic approach to culture, health, and well-being, taken by the local authority in terms of support by the local authority, but although closely working with the council, the NHS, but we also worked independently, and our independent was important. And also importantly, anyone could join, including artists, different types of organisation, healthcare providers, researchers. We're a cross-section network. We have about 150 plus members, with a core group of around 50 passionate people or individuals and groups in different shapes and sizes across the borough, in terms of across Southwark. We work with local, small, medium-sized organisations, the Science Gallery, Tate, the Old Vic, Mount View, Dulwich Picture Gallery. So we're open to working with most organisations, local residents, service users, health providers. And what we try to do is that we initiate 5 funding from, we get our funding through Southwark Council, through the public health, because we do a lot of things that resonates around public health and supporting activities. I think it's important to remember, as I keep on going back to, even in an area where Nathaniel spoke about, where perhaps there may not be a lot of assets in terms of community assets, and communities are developing their own assets. We in Southwark, we're awash with assets. We're awash with theatres, galleries, community provisions. But the biggest issue was the biggest issue for us in Southwark, if you know the borough, there's a high propensity of people from Black and African and Caribbean communities. There is a high deprivation in some areas of the borough, but yet we were still kind of locked out of those assets. It was more about people doing things for us as a community rather than with us. And that's one of the things that I think what SHREP has done is to engage more about the agenda and conversations about representations, about changing programs, looking how to do things differently, and why we want to do things differently. It has to be about us, but with us. I'm going to stop here because there's one person in this room who knows who I am, and that's Sister Stella, who runs an amazing organization called UK Rastafarian.
Oh,
And,
awesome. Stella, give us
they
a word.
they do a lot of creative arts and food programs in the borough. And what's interesting about her project, or the projects that they work with, although the emphasis is on a minority group of Rastafarians, actually they work, the Rastafarian belief and value also works with a range of different people in the community. So it could be people from, it's not just Rastafarians, it's people from other religions or other faith groups. It's people from other classes, in terms of white working class communities, coming to support what they do. I don't want to big her up too much, because she knows that, as I said, she knows that I can go on and talk and talk and talk, and I'm conscious of the time. But any questions, please pop it in the chat or go via Natasha's Civic Society.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cedric. And Stella, lovely to see you. Give us a wave so people can see who you are. Great to hear about your work as well. So we're going to come to Brendan now. Brendan, I've lost you, so you're going to have to give me... Oh, there we go. Here you are. Are you ready to be spotlighted?
I am ready to be spotlighted. Apologies, I've had a lot of technical problems this morning, so I was a little bit late joining you.
No problem. Welcome.
So working in Suffolk is very different from working in Southwark.
Yes.
I used to live in Suffolk. I lived in Camberwell for a long time before I moved to Suffolk. It's a very different proposition working, serving what is essentially a largely rural community. So I'm artistic director and CEO of an organisation called Dance East. And we occupy a beautiful purpose-built facility on Ipswich waterfront. It has 4 studios, 4 large dance studios, and a 200-seat theatre. And we run a whole range of projects, from classes for tots and through to classes for older adults. We support artists who make and present work, and we have a fairly extensive outreach programme that goes across Suffolk, into North Essex, across into Cambridgeshire and up into Norfolk. The reason why we do a lot of work with older adults is because of the demographic in Suffolk. I think it's 1 in 4 people who are over 65, and that's set to rise to 1 in 3 over the next 20 years. And I think we're all probably aware that remaining active in later life is critical to health outcomes. So I wanted to talk this morning about 2 creative health interventions to illustrate the kind of work we do. We do a whole load of other stuff, but I wanted to talk very specifically about 2 things. The first thing I wanted to talk about was our Dance for Parkinson's programme, which we've been running with English National Ballet now for over 10 years. Unlike some artistic activities that we talk about for health and wellbeing, this has really, really specific targeted outcomes. It's possibly as close to a clinical intervention as we get. But I wanted to talk about it because I think it illustrates just how powerful the tools that are out there are available to us, but I would argue are underused. And the way I wanted to talk about it was actually, some of you may be aware that Suffolk County Council cut funding to its arts portfolio recently. And as part of that process, we solicited testimonials from people. And I wanted to quote directly from one of the people who was that class, because I think it illustrates exactly what I'm talking about. It was the Dance for Parkinson's class which allowed me to become an independent person again. It's not a nice to have creative extra. Parkinson's is an incurable progressive disease, which is the fastest growing neurological condition in the world. Managing it requires medication and exercise of the right kind in equal measure. What the skilled practitioners of Dance East give people like me is neuroactive exercise, which is targeted to maximize the neuroplasticity of the brain. Other types, like walking and exercise classes, are neuropathive, good at keeping people fit, but not providing new ways for the brain to bypass areas which are dying. I'm taking the trouble to explain this because without the exercise class which I attend weekly, which approximately 30 other people, each one of us would require more attention from the multiple agencies, which we all agree with you are so stretched. At the moment, I don't need assistance of the kind I needed before I started going to the class. For example, I don't need carers coming in every day. Occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, physiotherapy, assistance from the social prescriber. I don't need to see my GP so often, or my neurologist, or the Parkinson's nurse. I don't fall over so much, so I'm less likely to trouble A&E. And I think one of the great arguments for, this is me speaking now, not my the person who attends that class. I think one of the great arguments for the reason why arts and in creative health is so important is because we all know all those services that this person was talking about are so incredibly stretched and also incredibly expensive. So interventions like this are substantially cheaper, and we'll be publishing research in late June that demonstrates actually they're often as effective, if not more effective.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to go. We do also do general classes for older adults, and we call them our Movers program. And the basic premise is to bring people together, to commune together, and because we believe, you know, if you provide exercise for both the mind and the body, sharing experience together, it is helpful for people to grow that sense of community that I think we all want. The model we've developed is that actually we work usually with local partners. We start the class, we stay committed to it for a year, we support it financially and with administrative support, we identify the practitioner, etc., etc. And over the year, we help with the local partners to turn that into a sort of a self-organising, self-financing thing that we can leave and we can move on. And we've done that in Sudbury, Hadley, Felixstowe, and Stowe markets. And I think the fact that, you know, these groups are still ongoing, despite the fact, you know, I think we left Stowe market in 2019. It suggests to me that actually it's really, really clear that these interventions are needed, wanted, and actually local people can do them. I'm going to leave it there because I think I was allowed 4 or 5 minutes, and I think I've probably done that. But you know, if anybody's got any questions, I'd be very happy to take them.
That's really wonderful, Brendan. Thank you so much. And I think that testimonial was a really brilliant way to articulate so much so quickly. I was going to ask you a question, but I think because of time, I'm going to skip over it. And I think you slightly answered it anyway. I was just going to try and highlight how dance and more specifically the existence of a regional dance entity like Dance East enriches like a whole local area, because you've talked a lot about the kind of almost like the therapeutic and work that creative and dance activities can do as a kind of therapy, non-clinical solution, but also there's all of the ways that it enriches our health in this even more nebulous and even more difficult to articulate way. So if you've got one quick answer to that, that'd be lovely to hear.
I mean, again, I think, you know, it's one of the things I criticise myself most about is the fact that I often spend all my time talking about the economic, the health, the education of what we do. And I rarely talk about the fact that actually dance changes lives. You know, just watching it it's an amazing, you know, it transformed my life. God knows where I'd be had I not, you know, wandered into a dance performance as a young man. But it's a very, very, you know, I think in these days, you know, we've spent all our time trying to justify our existence, and actually, you know, really we should also be remembering that, you know, what we do is art. These clinical outcomes only come because we create great art in the first place.
Yeah, I really agree. Well put. Thank you so much, Brendan. We're going to come to Bury St Edmunds now to hear from Owen, who runs the Theatre Royal there, which I'm from Bury St Edmunds, so it's particularly close to my heart. I also used to dance at Dance East as a child, so that's also, you're all close to my heart. But yes, Owen, over to you. Are you ready to be spotlighted?
Absolutely. Thank you, Natasha.
Okay.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Owen Calvert-Lyons and I am the Artistic Director and Chief Executive of Theatre Royal Bury St Edmunds, and we are the last remaining Regency theatre. We are a 206-year-old theatre in Suffolk. And fundamentally, I believe in the role of arts and cultural organisation, and particularly theatres, to build community and to enable communities to thrive. And I guess we do that predominantly through three strands of our work. The first is volunteering. All of our stewards here are volunteers. We have 120 volunteers, most of which are retired people finding a sort of new way of spending their time outside of work and into voluntary work. But some people use that at the other end of that ladder, of people who have struggled to access work and use this as a springboard into other employment. So they are a big part of our work. The other part is the fundamental aspect of a theatre, of people sitting in a room together, which is so basic, but so vital. Ultimately, community is a concept. You have to start by believing you're part of one. And one of the ways to do that is to spend time with other people you don't know. And so our space, 350 people, can sit in a dark room together and experience something together in which they have an active role. The theatre is not a passive experience. And that's fundamentally good for our health, both in terms of our interaction with our fellow citizens, other members of our community, but also the extraordinary thing that art does in enabling us to feel big things. You know, sitting in a dark room and experiencing jealousy, rage, anger, love, friendship, grief, you know, all these things that we may or may not experience in our life to the extent that we're presented with it in theatre, gives us an opportunity to explore those things in a safe space. And that is deeply good for our emotional well-being. Alongside that aspect of it, of which 70,000 people come through our door every year, we have a catchment area of very rural community. 330,000 people are served by our theatre. Separate to that, we have a great creative learning department, which works with 9,000 people a year in a much more intense way. So things like our youth theatre, our over 60s group. We also work in partnership with places like Women's Aid Refuge, Julian Support, which works with people experiencing significant mental health challenges. Bury St Edmunds for Black Lives. We run a trans support group. We're a founder member of Bury Pride. So we work with all of these groups, and in a way that Cedric described, how important it is that those groups are creating that work with us. It's not being delivered to them. These are local groups and communities that pre-exist us, that come towards us and understand that we can help them to use art to explore the things that they are interested in. So by being a hub, being a space, a welcoming space that people come towards, a place that can work in partnership and that welcomes other communities, we become a really vital space to deliver those crucial projects. And I think part of that is that people trust and believe in us. I think often people rush too quickly to try and deliver a project. They're running straight to the outcome. But unless you've built those communities and you've built that trust, actually you're never going to be able to deliver the sort of projects that have meaningful outcomes. And to give one example, I guess in the way that Brendan did so beautifully, during lockdown, we had a man come towards us. He lives in Newmarket, which is a town within our catchment, but far away, relatively far away. And he was a primary caregiver for his partner, and he only got 2 hours of respite a week. And we worked with him to write a story based on the street that he lived, because actually the only space he could go to, he couldn't leave the house and go very far away, but he could go for a walk down his street. And we worked with him to write a interactive play that other people could listen to about his street. And that was his only respite, and he credits that as having really got him through lockdown, of having a space of his own, having some respite. And we know that care and well-being is deeply interconnected. So his role as a carer in that was what we were really servicing. And also to pick up on Brenda's point about things that are psychoactive, you know, it's different to just an exercise class, actually something that sustains him, not just during the moments that he's engaged with it, but something that fills his time and his inner narrative and his life and gives it meaning and gives him a way of understanding the world that he's experiencing, is something that I think only art can do. So that's my sort of nutshell.
So well put. And I'm really grateful to you covering so well that the point about creativity and creating a shared experience. I just put in the chat, community is a concept, you have to believe you're part of one to have one. I think that's such a fantastic quote. I'm going to be quoting you. You have something to add?
Go with your question, Natasha, about kind of some of the big challenges facing us.
I was just going to ask Owen about what are some of the biggest challenges for running a regional theatre. So yeah.
I thought I wasn't going to say money, because it's kind of the fundamental, you know, can we solve most of those things through money? Maybe. But the other one, and one of those, I guess, connects to that is, as Brendan points out, Suffolk County Council recently cut all funding to arts and culture in Suffolk. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing not everybody's aware of is that local government is the biggest funder of the arts in the UK. And their gradual retraction from that is alarming. And a lot of that is that national government is not giving enough money to local government, and local government are making some really brutal decisions within that. And that's a massive threat to arts and culture. If the Labour Party are considering, the government are currently considering a review of the Arts Council, but you know, something that the Labour Party have talked about as well. I think the answer is not to devolution. It's not about giving money that currently sits with Arts Council, who have great specialist knowledge, into local government, because there we can see what happens to that local government money. It very quickly pulls away from arts, culture and community and goes into statutory delivery. So that's one of them. But the other one I would say is the retraction of arts education. It is a massive problem. We've already stopped delivering at 14 to 18, because those young people are being told it's not important to them, they're not coming in enough numbers, and we're having to stop delivering that area of work. 67% of British Oscar winners are privately educated. That is a massive, massive indictment of arts funding and arts education in the UK, and that is a major problem that we need to address.
100% with you, Owen. Thank you so much. Lillian, I think it is more than your turn now to ask a few questions. That's a lot of information to absorb, but I hope you've enjoyed it. Are you ready to be spotlighted again?
Yeah, that's fine. Well, first of all, thanks, Natasha. I'm just conscious of time. I need to be away just after 12.
Yeah.
I mean, just like thank you to Nathaniel and Cedric and Brendan and Owen for the presentations. I thought they were all, really powerful, and so many of those things that I kind of, recognised as being important. Particularly, sorry, I don't want to talk really, but what Cedric was sort of saying about, doing things with us rather than to us, I thought that was so important. And we know that the civil society and small grassroots organisations are so good at reaching marginalised communities in a way that the state very often isn't. And that's why I'd see you as absolutely crucial partners. And we do need to address the problem that you were highlighting, was it can be really difficult to obtain funding. And there's loads I could say about what the other presenters said as well. But I suppose one of the questions I had, and I'm trying to pick of which ones to ask you really, is what are the main barriers that you're facing that you've not already touched on to setting up community spaces specifically for creative health? And I think when Nathaniel in the video around about the Sabat Gallery said that funding was particularly difficult on the art side, and is that because local authorities are so cash strapped and pulling out funding? I mean, it's so clear that a lot of the work that all of you are doing is massively preventative. In terms of public health, it's fantastic value. It's far better to ensure people have good physical and mental health and good well-being, because then it saves huge amounts of money, not least in the health service, but has wider benefits. But what are the things that a Labour government should be doing to support creative health? If I ask it in that broadest sense, it gives everyone an opportunity to say what's the most important things they would want us to be doing.
Sorry, I muted myself. Cedric, I was just going to say, Cedric, I feel like you must come in there. And then Hayley, I really don't want to put you on the spot, so absolutely no pressure, but I just wondered if you might have a couple of words you might want to add after Cedric as well. If you'd like to, you can pop your hand up if yes.
I think, look, thank you, Lillian. I think the barriers, I think, is having a national strategy with regards to health and well-being, and being clear about that for each region of the country. In terms of when Brendan talked about sort of the demographic of his population, then let's kind of ensure that the strategy that links to both the arts and health and well-being actually makes sense for the people of Suffolk, rather than it's kind of almost a general commentary on something that's going to happen in London, Southwark. They're two completely different. So I think we need a clear national strategy that then sort of resonates around local needs that are matched with, and I do pick up on what Owen said about funding, the change and the landscape of the funding. And yeah, local authorities are stuck. They want to, when you speak to local authority officers, no one in that room wants to cut, but they are forced to, because the constraint that they're having to sort of deal with or address with from central government. So perhaps we need to look at that funding model in terms of ensuring that it's not sort of us pitting against each other regarding funding and support for local grassroots groups. I think there's a better way of working. And look, in this short time in this room, I mean, I've received lots of sort of complimentary comments in the chat. There's a vast array of knowledge in this space. And I'm sure we can all come up with some ideas and plans in terms of a much more sustainable funding model that reaches out both in the education system, because that's been poorly supported, and as Owen alluded to, it's not been poorly funded in the private educational sector. So what's happening is that you've got small grassroots groups, and even big, large organisations are being pitted against each other for that small amount of funding. And I think that's by design, and that's deliberate, so that it tries to, especially those communities who've always, voices have not always been heard, especially communities that I'm part of, in terms of people that look like me, Black, African and Caribbean, who are always struggling for funding. So if they're not in the room, if they're not in the table, then they're not going to get heard. So we need to look at those representations. We do need to look at those kind of changes, but let's look at how we can share resources or distribute resources. As Owen alluded to, he sees himself or their organisation as a hub, bringing in people, bringing in different people. Sometimes people who perhaps didn't even want to step over that threshold. But it's about trust, going out there and building those relationships. But it does need some finance to do some of that work. It's hard, but it does have some really both short and long-term benefits. I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Cedric. I just would throw in as well, Lillian, I think it's a lot to do with how outcomes are communicated and measured, and we're constantly trying to put things that are so emotional, and you can fit them into a kind of more scientific biomedical framework, and you can calculate the economic value of them, but trying to measure value in a particular way is really tricky. Hayley, Hayley's also from Southeast London, so yeah, over to you, Hayley.
Thanks, Natasha. So I'm a Programme Director for Prevention in Southeast London, and I think, Cedric, you've said everything beautifully, and I completely agree with everything you've said. I think the additionality that I would bring is we need some sort of ring fence funding. So in the current financial environment, with both the NHS and local authorities, there's funding sitting within the overall pool with operating targets and regulatory environments, just means that prevention is the first thing to go. And like Cedric said, none of us want that to happen. We fight tooth and nail, but the reality is that there's that kind of top-down pressure, and that's what happens, because you're dealing with the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff or rising social care costs, and you've got voters, and that in the mix just makes it inherently difficult. So unless we have ring-fence funding with a clear national strategy supporting both network development and grassroots organisations coming together, I personally just don't think it's going to happen in the current environment. So that would be my kind of call to action to add.
Thank you so much, Hayley. Does anyone else have something burning to add there? Because I wondered if people might have, before we lose Lillian, a question for Lillian. But if anyone's got an addition, where should we start then with the questions for Lillian? Does anyone want to raise their hands?
Natasha, could I answer a couple of the questions that have been posed already?
Definitely, yeah.
So there was a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, in terms of reviewing Arts Council England, it isn't to try and get rid of Arts Council England in any way, shape or form. I know how absolutely vital they are. It's only about considering how best to refocus, how best what role they can play, looking forwards, just kind of reviewing where they're at and how they should be directed, not about trying to cut them, in case that was the worry. I wanted to touch on the issue of education, because it's been mentioned a few times, and particularly Owen, I think, talked about the way in which arts education has been totally, devalued and diminished over recent years. And that's why we see, whilst the UK has a really thriving arts, theatre, culture scene, you're absolutely right, is that many of those who are receiving top awards have been educated in the private sector, which obviously accounts for a very tiny number, a very small proportion of people, but doing disproportionately well. Our GCSE enrolment in arts subjects is down 47%, and the EBAC, which the government have put a lot of focus on, it values Latin and ancient Greek, but it doesn't value art or drama or music. We think that's wrong. We think that the arts should be for everyone. They're a necessity, not a luxury. We've already said that we're going to launch a review of the education curriculum. We think every child should have the opportunity to study art or music or drama or sport at age 16, that it shouldn't be treated as a less important or a soft subject. It's absolutely vital that we invest in creative education, and it's for everyone, and it shouldn't be set up as a sort of competition that somehow STEM subjects matter and they have to be in competition with arts and drama. All those subjects matter, and in fact many of the skills that young people get from being engaged in art and drama and music are precisely the things that allow them to not just thrive in the jobs market, important as though that is, but thrive as individuals with great health and well-being as well. You know, I think we absolutely recognise that and are committed to taking steps to do something about that. And I completely recognise the challenges around local authority funding cuts, and that's true here in Nottingham as well, where our local authority have cut funding, not because they want to, not because they don't realise the value of arts and culture, but because of the situation we're facing. And I think, you know, we know that we need to find ways of shifting funding in many cases, particularly in relation to health. We spend lots of money at the acute end, and if we could redirect some of that to more preventative work, including, you know, the sort of social prescribing around arts and culture, we know that that could make huge savings. But we've got to work out how we're going to do that, and work out ways of ensuring that it goes to organisations who have the skills and expertise to reach those people who are currently missing out. And I know that, you know, there are lots of larger organisations who are very good at, you know, being the usual suspects who obtain funding, and we've got to utilise the expertise of the civil society sector, including those small grassroots organisations. And that does mean we have to find a better way of working to ensure that, you know, obviously some services will be commissioned, it's inevitable, but we've got to make, or will require people to apply for grants. But I know that there are issues around short-term funding and how difficult it is that you spend lots of time actually chasing funding pots rather than delivering the fantastic services that you can. And we've got to find ways to better support organisations and allow them to be able to be part of delivery. And we've got to make sure that there are those diversity of voices around the table. And that's part of our civil society missions action plan. It is making sure that policymakers, not just in culture, media and sport, but in all the key departments, are listening to the voices of civil society and taking you into account and listening to what you can bring to it when they're making policy decisions, rather than it being an afterthought. And that's one of the commitments that we've made. Sorry, I'm conscious of time.
No. I feel awful, but I'm sounding like I'm cutting you off. I was going to add to what you're saying about, because also you sort of asked earlier, I think another big barrier is kind of trusting and empowering civil society organisations to just do their thing, because there's a beautiful ecosystem where things just happen very naturally in the sector. And I think people who are a bit more accustomed to top-down decision making, that can be quite hard to get their heads around and just trust. So I think it felt like that's kind of what you were hinting at there. And
yeah, I think that's always the balance, isn't it? Because it's public money, so there's always scrutiny and around accountability. But one of the things I've written down and put a big circle around is when Owen said people trust us and believe in us. And I think that's right. That is one of the things that arts organisations and civil society organisations have, is they've got trust with the communities. They know what the needs are locally, and they know how to meet them, and people trust them, and that's why they can engage far more than perhaps some of the other state sector organisations can do. So, you know, I think that's a really important point. I'll shut up there for a minute.
So many interesting points. It's really hard. So Gunn, we're going to come to you next. And Lillian, have you got time for one more question? And then everybody else, we'll keep the call open, and let's all stay on. Anyone who wants to talk for a bit longer and discuss things for a bit longer, let's all stay on the call if you'd like to. Yes, Sigon, where have you disappeared?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, ready to be spotlighted.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Lillian, for being here to talk to us. It's really it's an unusual thing that we haven't experienced that much over the last few years. So my question really is just about think about that, relating to what you were saying about the top-down way of thinking, and it's around for me, it's around the Arts Council, and alongside that, the music hubs, and the way that things have been structured over the last couple of years has very much been about a top-down way of thinking about things, which masquerades as consultation, and people get very cynical in the sector when that happens, because they get a feeling, well, the decision's made already. They're just talking to us to essentially make it look like they're consulting with us. So I guess my question, is about how can we get a system, particularly the Arts Council, which actually helps organisations rather than putting top-down structures that hinder them. In particular, I sit on the board of an MPO, and the structures for reporting that are in place are absurd. I mean, they've been designed. We always ask every meeting. We ask, who has designed this, and why have they designed it in such a way that we have to answer things and put things in a way that doesn't make sense to us? And I know the same things. NPOs all over the country are saying the same things about how this top-down thing is working, and we know it's not the Arts Council who actually have decided this, but it's actually something that comes from central government. So that's my plea for going forward, is we look at how we can enable organisations rather than hindering them with unnecessary bureaucracy.
I mean, I think that's a really important point, and it goes to what I was saying earlier, which is that if we want to harness the creativity, the innovation, the trust that exists out in civil society and in many creative and cultural organisations, is we've got to break down the barriers that make it difficult for you to access that help and support. And as I say, I know obviously there is accountability whenever there's distribution of public funds, but we've got to find a way to do it that that reduces the barriers and makes it so that you can spend your resources doing the good stuff that you're doing, rather than vast amounts of resources on coping with the bureaucracy of dealing with a variety of, whether it's government organisations or whether it's arm's length bodies, and I've heard that many times from from a variety of organisations, that we need to be able to do that better. I don't know that I've got the answers at the tips of my fingers, but I absolutely hear it and understand the importance of tackling it.
Thanks so much, Lillian. Have we got time to quickly have a question from Brandon?
Yeah,
you're right.
Okay. Yeah, I do. I'm on my last one, but yes, of course.
Yes. Okay. Last question. Yeah, and as I say,
I'll be really brief. I think it's a plea for more. If there is a Labour government, a plea for more joined-up thinking throughout government departments. I work in an art form that the education department don't think of as being an art form. They think of it as physical education. We don't talk enough to the NHS. So if there was a way of a new Labour government actually acting as a catalyst for dialogue across departments and some real joined up and strategic thinking, I think it would be welcomed. That last point about Arts Council reporting, I think everybody in the country would echo that. Just has to deal with the Arts Council.
So then finally, before I go, yes, Brendan, I completely agree about getting out of silos thinking. And one of the things that we have been doing is, and there was just an example we did the other week, which was around young people and approaches to improving youth services, partly in order to tackle issues around young people getting drawn into the criminal justice system, is to bring colleagues together from at the moment shadow ministers across different departments, because so many issues and concerns, whether it's health or or anything else, they're not tackled through one single way. You need different parts of government working collaborative together, and too much fragmentation, actually, it's a waste of resources. So I absolutely hear that, and that is very much part of our planning and thinking as we think about how we would deliver in government. I'm really sorry I haven't had more time. No. So much good stuff to hear, and so impressed with all the work that Brendan, that you were doing, that Owen, that you were doing, and Cedric and the family are really exciting. And that, you know, there is so much amazing work happening in communities. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. We really value it, and we really value your voices. And we want to make sure that we give you an opportunity to help us to, if we're fortunate enough to be in government, to actually deliver on creating, you know, a healthier, stronger, more successful society. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lily.